So I recently watched the movie Ready Player One, which was really good. It's really aimed at people like me, people my age, raised in the 80s and 90s. But it's about the future. It's about an immersive computer game that millions of people are playing across the world, and they're all competing for this massive games empire. And the game creator has sort of put himself into the game as well and left clues and keys for people. And there are loads of references to other movies as well. People who were brought up in the 80s and 90s would get those references. And at one point in particular, there was this wonderful jingle that just went, diddle diddle. And I thought, oh, that's from Back to the Future. And it was so clear. And it was like I was watching the Back to the Future movie with Michael J. Fox and all those other people. There's that little jingle sound that reminds you of something from the past. And you get that a lot in the Bible. And if you don't open yourself up to that possibility, the Bible's not going to make a lot of sense. It's going to look pretty weird. So lots of references to previous parts. And that's why we really need to read all of the Bible. We need to read it from beginning to end so that then we'll see the references and the interconnectedness of all of the bits of the Bible. And it gets really interesting and really exciting. I hope you were seeing that in our last series with Joshua. And we stopped just up to Jericho, just because that's the bit where you might know and you could maybe look at it for yourself. We're starting again in John. And as we open John's Gospel, we immediately get a diddle-a-diddle-um, a little jingle that will take us back to the future, back to the past, to a time before time. So we're going to look at John's Gospel, get a Bible, get an actual Bible. And we're going to read from John 1, 1 to 5, the very beginning of John's Gospel. Here's what my version says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So that's not like Matthew or Luke, is it? With angels or shepherds, wise men, stars in the east, going to King Herod, all that kind of stuff, stables, nativity. That's not your average nativity scene, is it? So what is going on here? What is going on here? What do these words remind you of? What makes you hear that jingle? Diddle-a-diddle-um. Oh, I know that. I know that. Well, it's there twice, isn't it? In case you missed it the first time. Let's look down at that. Verse 1. In the beginning. Where have I heard that before? Maybe there's nothing in it. Hang on, verse 2. He was in the beginning with God. Okay, it's come up twice now. That's probably important. Where do we find that? Where do we find in the beginning? We find that in the beginning. If we go all the way back to Genesis, it's really easy to find. I really recommend that you grab an actual Bible and look at the beginning. The beginning of Genesis, Genesis means beginning, says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And anybody listening to John's Gospel would have known this chapter. They might have even known the whole chapter off by heart, the whole chapter of Genesis. They might even know the first 11 books of Genesis. They might even 11 chapters of Genesis. They might even know much, much more than that. So they would be hearing these jingles ringing all the time. So there are lots of connections, actually. It's not just in the beginning as well. If we go back to John's Gospel, we'll see it says this. We've got stuff like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. What words do we have in Genesis chapter 1? How does God create the heavens and the earth? How does he create all the different things? He speaks. Let there be. He speaks. He speaks. He speaks. So the Word is a creative thing. It is God's power. And so we've got it here at the beginning of John. In the beginning, the Word. Okay. We also get in John, we've got here, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. So life, in Genesis 1, God is creating life. He is breathing life into things. He's breathing life into animals, but also into people, into men. And then in chapter 2, into women. We've got another one as well, though. That life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So there we've got another one, light. So in the beginning, God creates light. Let there be light. And there's light and there's dark, there's evening, there's morning. So in the beginning, word, life, light, dark. It's pretty clear, isn't it, that he's saying, okay, so we're going to start this gospel again, but you need to bear in mind Genesis 1:1. Why is he doing this? What's wrong with angels? What's wrong with shepherds? What's wrong with little donkey? What's wrong with all those other things that we know from the Nativity? Well, what John is doing here is he's showing us a really different side of Jesus. In a way, he's saying our view of Jesus isn't actually quite big enough. So he's writing this after the first three Gospels. It seems clear, if you dig around in the scholarship, that people are pretty happy with the idea that there were three other Gospels first, and then John wrote this fourth Gospel to shed a different light on Jesus. And in the other three Gospels previously, in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark and Luke, we've seen Jesus as a rabbi, as a man, as a prophet, as the priest, as the king, as the fulfillment of the prophecy, as a miracle worker. There are loads of things which are all true about who Jesus is. And they're really sophisticated. They also go back to other Old Testament imagery as well. And they also have other little jingles going off. But John is just taking it one step further, and he's just saying, okay, I think you might not be quite realizing what's going on here, who that this Jesus is. He is even bigger. He is even more important. He is even more eternal than you thought he was, as if you can become more eternal. Let's have a little look at verse 9. What's happening here? He says this, verse 9. The true light which enlightens everyone was coming into the world. So what's he saying by that? What do you think he could mean? And then we can look at verse 14 as well. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So what's going on here? Have a think about it. Have a think about it. The true light is coming into the world. The word became flesh and dwelt among us. He's showing us that the one who created everything, who was there at the beginning of the universe before time, is now coming into the world. Have we really understood that the creator, before time, before the future, before the present, before even the past, is walking into the thing that he has created? This is huge. This is huge. What he's showing us is Jesus of Nazareth, that you might have seen. So, he's known as Jesus of Nazareth because that's where he was brought up. And actually, there's a lovely little joke in chapter 1 as well of John's Gospel. Look at verse 45. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nazareth? It's like, the Messiah comes from Nazareth? I don't think so. Nazareth was like a new town. There was no great history attached to it. We know that he was born in Bethlehem. He was brought up in Nazareth. I mean, it's kind of like saying Yeovil. It's kind of like saying Swindon. Jesus was, the Messiah's come. He's from Swindon. He's from Yeovil. Oh, okay. I wouldn't have thought that. I mean, Yeovil, let's be clear, is an ancient town. It's been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. But you get the idea that it doesn't seem very special in the great grand scheme of things. So what John is doing is showing us that actually the ordinariness of Jesus, the humanity which really comes across in other Gospels, which is really important, that God becomes fully man, that Jesus is fully man, so that then he can take our place on the cross because he is like us, he is one of us, that this is the eternal one. So that's our thought for the day. Jesus is eternal. Jesus is eternal. So what difference does that make? Well, if Jesus is eternal, he was there at the creation. He has authority over us. He has authority over me and over you. He's spoken creation into existence. So we shouldn't be surprised when he just commands winds and the waves. We can't be surprised when he just finds a load of water, he puts it in the jars and just, boom, turns it into wine. That's what we're going to see in chapter 2. Jesus made us. He understands us. He understands how life is to be lived. So we need to listen to him. We need to listen to him. It's not advice. It is eternal wisdom. It is the source code of the universe. Jesus knows the source code. Jesus knows how everything works. We need to follow his teaching, even when it seems wrong, because he knows. He knows. How do we play the game of life? We listen to the creator of that game, and that is Jesus Christ. That's why we need to understand what he says in the Gospels. So that's the thought for the day, something to pray. We've started in John 1, we've gone all the way back to Genesis 1. We're now going to go forward to Revelation 1 and look at verses 17 and 18. And let's use these to fuel a prayer. So I'm going to read those for you. They'll appear on the screen, and then you can do your own prayer. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, but he laid his right hand on me, saying, "Fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive for evermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades." Why don't you pray something based on how Jesus is in the past, he's in the present, he's in the future, he's outside time, and that he is worthy of your honour, your glory, your respect. Say a prayer to Jesus now. Amen. Thought for the day, something to pray, something to say. You could always say, if you're asked about this, have you ever wondered why there's no nativity story at the beginning of John's Gospel? It's often read out in carol services, but it's nothing like any of the other Gospels, is it? Why is that? You could have a chat about that. Okay, I hope that's been useful. There's an action replay to come if you want a little bit more. It's a really cool bit. I'm excited by it, and it links back to the Joshua series a little bit as well. But if you've had enough, that's great. Cheerio. So here's a cool thing, and another jingle is going to go off here, but it's not going to make any sense unless you know the Greek, which of course you almost certainly don't. I don't know much Greek. I'm actually relearning it because I want to see what's going on behind. I want to see the original words, and then you can see connections that you can't see in the English. So here's John 1:14 in the Greek, and then here's the English translation. And if you have a look, it says there's the word skenu there. What does the English say? It says, "And the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory." The word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now that word skenu is more like pitched his tent. So God pitched his tent among us. What's a tent? It's a tabernacle. Jesus tabernacled among us. There's a jingle going off. Do you remember? In the Joshua series, we looked at the tabernacle and how that was God's dwelling place among his people in the Holy of Holies as well. Within the tabernacle, there was that really special place. Do you remember all that stuff? Well, it's almost as if John is just saying here, you know, when God came down to be with his people in the tabernacle, well, that's a bit like what Jesus is doing now. He's coming from outside of time to come into the story, a bit like the creator of the game in Ready Player One, actually, who's actually in the game, although he's dead. So it's just code. It's not real. We can't really imagine it being real because our imaginations are so limited. But John is trying to really expand our minds so that we can see how big Jesus is. And again, to his original audience, they would have just thought, tabernacle among us. You know, they would have known exactly what he was talking about. So the tabernacle, of course, becomes the temple. And then Jesus has a bit of a go at the temple in the next chapter, and we'll get to that in a few weeks' time. But that's the bit that I thought was really interesting that you might be interested in. The word became flesh and tabernacled among us. That's what it should really say. And so that would be another little jingle. There's a bit extra. That's your action replay. Thanks so much for watching, and I will speak to you next time.